So the marathon stuff, it's getting to the point where it's starting to feel a little sad. It's starting to just really, it's getting hard to watch. Because here's the deal. I played the game at the press event thing that they did, and I thought, I had fun. I'd play more of it, and I did once the alpha launched. I played another 5 to 10 hours, but now I'm good. Honestly, even if the game launched tomorrow and I had access for free, I wouldn't need to play more. I feel like I've seen everything the game has to offer, and I played the free closed alpha thing. So I feel like it was really lacking in content. It needs probably another year. It needs a lot more time. It needs more modes. It needs bigger environmental events. It needs the ranked mode. It needs that fourth map that they don't want to tell anybody about, but they say is amazing. It just needs more. And that was before all of this happened. And I felt like it wasn't ready yet, and that they were rushing it out because I think PlayStation is kind of forcing their hand. And then this whole art debacle went down, which we all know about at this point. But I thought that this thing that they did was really telling. The fact that Bungie leadership forced them to still do this AMA thing, play MA, sorry, I thought was so, indicative of how leadership handles things at Bungie. Clearly they've not slept a wink in the last 48 hours since this news broke, especially I believe this is the art director. He has not slept a wink. You can tell on his face. And as far as we understand it, this is, according to them, the result of one artist at Bungie years and years and years ago when they first were starting on Marathon that put all of this artwork into mood boards, into the texture sheets, into all of these different things. And then they used it while they built the game out for years. And allegedly they didn't know about it, right? So if that is true, these guys, I'm sure, could use a break. They're not on their best, they're not well rested. There's just many reasons why maybe you delay this play MA, right? There's plenty of reasons why you maybe push it back a week. Hey, we hear you. We're working on fixing the art situation. We're going to delay it. They were going to show gameplay in this thing, and now they're not, because they're stripping it of all of the textures and stuff that were taken from that artist. So they don't even have gameplay to show at this AMA thing. It's insane why they still did it, but I think that shows just how Bungie leadership is so I don't know, obtuse maybe. I don't even know what you call it. Just uncaring, inconsiderate. I don't even know. But clearly there's a problem with Bungie leadership. And at this point, it seems like everybody at Bungie is really fed up with it. Morale at Bungie is reportedly in free fall over Marathon. New report from Paul Tassi outlines this. Let's see. I've spoken to some current and former employees about Bungie's excuse for the art theft. Studio morale, the possibility of a delay, and some very real changes when it comes to the upcoming presentation and playtesting of the game. Here's what I've learned. Public explanation for the art theft. One ex-employee taking things in 2020 is the same one being given internally at Bungie among rank and file. So they're not telling the public one thing and then telling, internally something else. In the studio, this is their explanation. This is what happened. Sony and Bungie legal are now sorting through this, and there is unlikely to be any new information as all of this continues to unfold. It is not clear how long an audit will take of the assets to remove or find any more plagiarism. It's an expansive enough process to have Bungie not even show any footage at all in its recent live stream. Yeah, it's a bit of an oopsie. Morale is in free fall across all departments, and the vibes have never been worse. Everyone has the same concerns about what happens to Bungie as a result, and as a studio, if Marathon bombs, which is something they absolutely cannot afford, which is true. Bear in mind, again, just a reminder, Sony spent $3.7 billion on Bungie to get Destiny 2, Marathon, and a third project they were working on. The third project has been spun off into its own thing at a different team that's formed by former Bungie employees. Destiny 2 has been losing money for a long time, and so that leaves Marathon. And if Marathon not just underperforms, but flops, it's hard to see an outcome that's good for Bungie. I mean, it's really hard to see any outcome with this that is good. There are not even hints or jokes about a delay from the September release date internally. Internally, they're not even like hinting at it. Oh my God. With that said, it is entirely possible, if not likely, those conversations are happening privately between higher up Sony and Bungie leadership. It's unclear what the plan is to launch the game in a now, quote, actively hostile environment. This is the problem as far as I can see it. There's no way right now, as far as I can come up with in my brain, for them to launch with like good vibes. There is no good vibe with this game. Right now it is radioactive, it's toxic, and yet even after the play tests, people were already kind of towards it. They liked the art style, ironically enough. They liked the art style. They liked the cinematics that they did. But all anybody could say is like after that cinematic launched, people were like, yeah, that's really cool. Can we get a single player game with that? Can we get a narrative like linear game like the original like Marathon games? Can we do that? No, it's an extraction shooter. Okay. So already people were not super stoked about like just the game in general. And that was before all of this happened. So now there's very little reason to get super excited for it. Some changes to future plans have been made, or had been made before this new plagiarism development, mainly as a reaction to gameplay footage in the closed alpha. At the start of this month, Bungie pulled the plug on its main Marathon marketing plan, which was going to have a new trailer in June along with the launch of pre-orders. The whole campaign needs to be reworked now. A heavily marketed public beta in August may be changed into a roadmap of public playtests with no actual details set yet. This would align with Bungie's stated multiple opportunities to play before launch rather than just the upcoming beta. Marathon was originally pitched by higher up good old boy Bungie leadership, and as far back as 5 years ago, the devs were telling them what would and wouldn't work and were often ignored. Many have said previously that it needed to have some sort of PvE component, and apparently solo queuing was also a big point of debate as well. All of this between necessary asset auditing, a reworked marketing campaign, and shifting playtest plans scream of a game that's not coming out in 4 months, or at the very least shouldn't be, though there are no indications of that yet. However, at this point, it may just be the case that another 3, 6, 12 months would not fix what ails the game, which is more than just the presentation and some playtesting. But for many, it's questionable core concept wrapped in extremely cool aesthetics. But now they've lost that last bit as a praise point as well. Yeah, it was kind of the one saving grace was people thought the game's art style looked cool. And now it feels weird to praise the game's art style. You know, the one thing everybody's like, yeah, game, but the art style's cool. Now it's like, oh, you like the art style? Okay, well, oh, so there's that. Yeah, they've reportedly scrapped the June marketing plans for Marathon, and you know, we kind of half jokingly threw out a hypothesis back when we first were talking about the playtests with Marathon, where I was like, you know, there's a conspiracy theory to be explored where Sony is intentionally sending Marathon out to die in a pool of milk. And it was basically based on a couple of key tidbits, which is that the game is pretty transparently not ready for launch. And yet Sony is shoving it out the door and is seemingly unwilling to consider delays, which is something that is also echoed by this reporting. And so it's almost like they want it to fail. And then we looked into some of the other financial stuff where a lot of the like people at Bungie, they have stock options that are set to vest at the end of this year. And so one of the arguments was, hey, maybe Sony is forcing this game out the door so it either fails or succeeds by the end of the year. So if it works, Bungie execs get their big paydays where a lot of them walk away with millions upon millions of dollars. Or if it fails, those executives that Sony, I'm sure, is not too thrilled with, you know, their financial futures look like this as well, because they thought that they had a giant piggy bank in the form of Sony, which they did for a while, but they took advantage of it and then squandered all that money. And so Sony gets one last middle finger to them. We jokingly put that out when all of this started. And now it's like, if they don't delay it, I don't know what other conclusion to draw than that. Like, the only chance this game has at any semblance of success would be to delay the crap out of it by like a year and a half, redo major components of, like, you know, the texture work, some of the art design, things like that. And then they also have to add in like solo queues. They have to add in a good bit more content. They need bigger environmental things. I said earlier on stream, I thought it would be really cool if they had sort of a Helldivers 2-esque meta narrative that they could employ based on player behaviors. There are ways, I think, to get people excited about the game again and for them to frame it as like a comeback. But even then, it's a long shot, and that takes hundreds of millions of dollars when you're talking about multi-year delays to a game on this scale. Very, very difficult to pull off. And that's assuming that their bosses are willing to do that. And I think it's pretty clear Sony doesn't want to. So at this point, I mean, I kind of agree with this Paul Tassi op-ed. It's just over for Marathon. Like, I don't see a realistic outcome where this works. I just don't. As he writes here, I've tried to put this off for a while now, giving Marathon the benefit of the doubt in terms of fixing what ails it and maybe snagging an audience that's large enough to make it at least sustainable. But no, it's over. I can't dispute it anymore. This has probably always been true, but the events of the past week have cemented it. I will get into the live streaming plagiarism and all that later, but this is a long list of what's gone wrong in the past, what's currently going wrong, and the future that does not look any brighter. And it's basically, goes through the concept. The entire idea of this game was a mistake. Bungie has said that this came from a bunch of them playing Tarkov a while ago. I heard that among that group, it was one good old boy in leadership who pushed to make this Bungie's biggest non-Destiny project and the hopeful rebirth of a strong IP for the studio, now under Sony, which it assumed would produce another hit like this. It just seems like it was one guy that really liked the idea of doing a Tarkov game because they like Tarkov, and that's where this started and ended. Like, that was the whole concept. And then they talk about how they're trying to make it accessible to new players, which means stripping out some of the hardcore elements, but then the new players don't have a lot of long-term benefit to playing, and there's not a lot of long-term progression because of that. So they're stripping out the things that they really need to make the game engaging, but it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't remove long-term progression to make the game more accessible and then be surprised when people are like, yeah, there's not a lot of long-term progression. It's like, yeah, could have told you that.
Firechild 460 donated $10 through Super Chat. A few weeks ago I said, let Bungie cook, it's just an alpha. Well, gang, the kitchen is on fire and emergency services are on the way.
Yeah. Unironically, they started an oil fire and now the entire neighborhood's burning down. Because it's not just their house. If this goes down, Destiny goes down, any hopes of like a future Destiny 3 or something probably go out the window. Like, they're burning down the entire neighborhood with this. It's wild. Like, it's wild. Thank you for the 10. That's very generous. Yeah, none of this was helped. And this is perhaps the other thing that's crazy. None of this was helped. That at the exact same time as Marathon's alpha, it was interrupted by the Arc Raiders alpha, a much more traditional extraction shooter and a much better one, which I can also stand by.
Christopher Burnett donated $9.99 through Super Chat. How has Sony not done a hostile takeover of Bungie by now? If I was CEO of Sony, I'd cancel every Bungie in development, fire almost everyone and rebuild Bungie with new talented and
with new talent and competent staff. They've already started to do that. You remember they rearranged a bunch of it. They took a bunch of devs out, moved them to other positions. They took that team that was working on the third game, moved them outside, did a different thing. I think they already did that. And I think they're just preparing, like they were hoping that maybe Marathon could pop off. But at this point, I think they're just preparing to scrap it. If they don't delay it, I don't see any other explanation than they're just going to scrap it. They're going to launch it. When the player numbers are abysmal, they'll let it run for a week or two. Then they'll shut it down. They'll write the whole thing off, all 400, 500 million of it, and they'll shut down the studio and they'll just move on. They might still keep, Destiny functioning and running, and they'll just have a support team for that. But I think they'll get rid of every Bungie executive, everybody. Because here's the thing. I think if they honestly are expecting to get rid of all of the executives at Bungie as part of this, they got rid of one, the former director of Marathon that Joe Ziegler replaced. They got rid of him because of allegations of office misconduct and stuff. But they faced a lawsuit as a result of that because that guy was expecting like $50-60 million paydays, and he didn't get them as a result of his firing. And I'm sure that there's other massive paydays for some of these executives coming up. So if Sony is planning on getting rid of them, you have to remember, for Sony, they're like, okay, they're going to sue us for wrongful termination. So we need to give them enough rope to hang themselves. And then we get to fire them and we can say, we gave you all the time you needed. You're the one that screwed up the art style. You're the one that had a game incomplete. We told you were launching at the end of 2025 and you failed to deliver. And so when those lawsuits are filed, they can go to court and have all this lined up and win those cases. So I think that that's also a component of this, is that Sony's like, we'll let it play out. You know, they've got the executives on those hooks and they're letting the line run out until the fishy gets tired and then they're going to reel them in, you know? It's crazy. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Marathon looked so bland, and then in Arc Raiders, we had this. If you didn't play it, just watch. Okay, there's a giant robot down here looking at the player, just so you know. Oh my God. It's pretty cool. There's nothing even that exciting that happens in the entirety of Marathon, okay? Like nothing. Like Arc Raiders, actually kind of crazy. It's actually kind of crazy, okay? Really good time. And everybody who played the alpha had a really good time. Had a really, really good time. So I think that also made Marathon feel all the worse, because it's like for example, people were complaining that that there was no proximity chat. Guess what Arc Raiders has? Proximity chat. People were frustrated that Marathon didn't have solo queues. Guess what Arc Raiders has? Solo queues. Like everything that you could point to Marathon and be like, it's missing X, Y, and Z, Arc Raiders had and did better. And so it just made the game look all the worse. Like it really, really did. It was more polished, more fun, more expected features found in extraction shooters. All you have to do is look at the fact that Arc Raiders player count went up every single day of its alpha, where Marathon's almost always went down. By the end, it was sub 20% of what it started with. Twitch viewers were even worse, going from 150,000 at launch as big streamers tried it, crashing to 1,000 to 3,000 viewers later near the end, where big chunks of that might have even been one or two Destiny streamers alone.
Vendor the Offender donated $10 through Super Chat. Who was the creator that consulted on the game when it first started development?
Dr. Lupo. He's the one that was consulting on it. He said going back 5 to 6 years, when it was like 4 people, and a whiteboard working on it. Yeah, Lupo was a very, very nice guy to me and everybody else at the event. Very nice guy. But he recently found himself in some hot water because he cheated in a chess event like 2 weeks ago. It was just like, it wasn't even close to. It was like he was playing a game, and you guys know me. I used to play in chess tournaments all the time. Like I love me some chess. But he went from like hanging his queen like here, and then he proceeded to play engine perfect moves nonstop for like 30 moves straight, which this isn't a surprise to anybody. If you have a rating of 600, I'm glad you're trying the game and you're getting familiarized. But like a 600 rated player, like I think I was rated 600 when I was 6 years old. And that's not to like pat myself on the back or anything. That's just to say that like when you're 6 years old, you are going to not play like a perfect AI machine. Like you're just not. Okay, you're going to be making lots of mistakes, like hanging your queen. But he proceeded, after hanging his queen, he pulled up a second monitor thing and started looking at it occasionally, and proceeded to make perfect moves nonstop and eventually come back and win. And especially like unintuitive moves that a 600 player would not do, juggling all sorts of things. Like your average 600 player is not going to play Knight C2. He's not going to play Knight C2. Freeing up the bishop, going after G7, attacking the bishop, preparing rook E1, protected by the knight once the bishop moves back. Like no 600 players playing Knight C2, but he proceeded to just play perfect moves nonstop. And so initially he said, no, it's fake, it's not real. Yeah, and then you can see he ends up winning. Bishop D5, no 600 rated players playing Bishop D5, leaving the knight on C7 hanging. Like, come on. Come on, dude. I feel like lower rated players don't realize how obvious it is when you cheat in chess. But once you know kind of what you're doing in chess, it's really obvious. Okay, it's really, really obvious. You play chess, yeah, all the time. That's a chess set back there. That's not just like a piece of nothing. That's a big ass chess set. I have a box full of chess trophies from back in the day I think in my garage. Might be in the attic. I'm not sure. But yeah, all of this to say, anyway, that's the guy that consulted on this. Okay. We went down a rabbit hole. Okay. We went down a rabbit hole. With all this, I think it's just, with Marathon, it's just a game that nobody really wanted to begin with. And then you show like a really cool cinematic that people do like, but all anybody can think of is, yeah, we love that. Can we have that? Can we have like a cinematic narrative game, first person shooter? Like the original Marathon with this art style in this world. But no, it's an extraction shooter. And it's a mistake that like Sony also made with Concord. Because you remember when they first did this, they showed off this cinematic trailer. People were like, oh, it's like their own version of Guardians of the Galaxy. Hot sauce guy. Love hot sauce guy. Weird blue gorilla with red face. Love that guy. People are like, you know what? I'm interested in this. And then it turns out to be a hero shooter. What? And it's a similar thing with Marathon, where they show a really cool cinematic, but then it's an extraction shooter that's being rushed out the door. It's a repeated issue at Sony, is that they keep doing this kind of thing. They don't seem to be learning their lesson. So again, my perspective is that if they put Marathon out in September and they don't delay it, I can't see any other explanation or any justification for that choice other than Sony basically wants to just see this thing die, probably because they want to clean house on the executive level. And I don't blame them for wanting to do that at this point, but they probably want to clear house or clean house because of that. And my assumption would be that they're going to do that to avoid problematic lawsuits, because they can be like, no, we told them they had to launch this game. The game launched terribly. They can make an argument in court that the whole company was basically defunct at that point. So they decide to shut down the company before those executives get the chance to redeem their stock options. And then Sony doesn't have to pay out $50 million in stock to a bunch of people that lost them billions, which I kind of would respect it if Sony were that petty. They're like a multi-billion-dollar company and they're like, yeah, just because they screwed us over so much, we're going to force them to shove this out the door. It's going to flop. We're going to shut down the studio, fire all of them, and then they don't get their retirement. Like, it's so petty, but it kind of seems like that's what's happening. So, I respect them for it nonetheless, but we'll see if that actually is what's happening. Again, if they delay it, there's at least a chance, still probably only 1%, maybe, like very, very slim, but there's at least a chance.
Jimbo404 donated $10 through Super Chat.
Thank you, Jimbo.
Is Sony banking on Destiny Rivals to recoup a lot of their initial investment? I know gacha is a huge market, but do you think it will be able to break through?
I mean, I'm sure it'll make money, because mobile games make a lot of money, especially in recognizable IP. As for whether it I don't think that makes 3.7 billion. So they won't have to pay. No. So what we're talking about, Darth Artemis, just so we're clear, is that $3.7 billion is the entire package for acquiring the company. As a result of that giant package, giggity, there's a few different components of it. So parts of it, might be paying off the lease of the building. So maybe the lease on the building or buying the building or whatever else. Buying out the IP might be another big chunk. You have to pay for that. You might also be buying out the contracts of various employees. Like, there's all sorts of different things built into that $3.7 billion sum, which is this total box, right? But then certain parts, like this yellow chunk, would be things like stock options. So they say to Bungie executives, we'll pay you each like 50 million if you stay on, and in 3 years or 5 years, you've reached these profitability targets. So if you're making money, if the company is healthier than ever, if you launch Marathon and it reaches this amount of profitability or sells this many copies or reaches this Metacritic score, whatever the standards are that they could put in there, they could put in whatever they want. But they have these standards and definitions of what they need to do to achieve this. And what the conspiracy theory basically is that Sony has a bunch of these going out to executives at Bungie, and they're really pissed that they've basically wasted all of this money at this point, and they feel misled and lied to and deceived. So the conspiracy theory, allegedly, is that they're going to basically screw over the Bungie executives by forcing them to put Marathon out in September, so they don't have the ability to achieve the standards that were outlined, so they don't have to pay them these stock options. So the Bungie executives don't get their big payday, which would be really funny. Would be really, really funny if that's what's happening. Likely, it's not. Most of the Bungie executives have already made bank, but it would be really, really funny if they found a way to screw over the executives that basically screwed them out of $4 billion. I guess time will tell. Time will tell. Ex-Bungie dev says Marathon leadership was, quote, extremely toxic and humiliating to work with. Bungie leadership needs to be gutted completely. Let's see. Spirit posted on Blue Sky saying, as a former Bungie employee who worked on Marathon, I feel for those still at the studio. Working with engineering/Marathon leadership was extremely toxic and humiliating. I won't speak about the rest, but Bungie leadership needs to be gutted completely. They worked as a senior software engineer from June of 22 to May of 24. Per his LinkedIn profile. His comments shed more light on what appears to be a deeply troubled work environment. In his own words, he described the daily reality of working under leadership as extremely toxic and humiliating, making it clear that the issues were not just about the project's direction, but how the teams were treated on a personal level. This isn't the first time he's been open about his experience at Bungie. Last year, after the studio laid off more employees, he said he left Bungie because, quote, their leadership is the worst I've worked with. Rampant micromanagement, frequent toxicity and violations of their core values, and no ability to execute on their multi-franchise vision. Oh, every day was a fight for autonomy and trust. Every day was someone telling me I'm not allowed to speak on any issue or problem in a professional tone. Every day was someone telling me my industry experience didn't matter and that some failed CEO knows best as our sub-area lead. Oh! Hold on, let him cook. Let him cook. It was on our minds since the last layoffs in October of 23. We asked Pete, and his response was that it was a lever he'd pull again. They need to flush out leadership completely. My team was excellent, but it felt like everything else prevented us from doing anything meaningful. He also pointed out that repeated layoffs have only pushed the studio to rely more on contractors and even AI, making things even more difficult for the full-time staff. Quote, so when I hear that they laid off another round of my talented colleagues and friends, I feel angry. They're not at fault. They're not the ones who need to be canned. And every round only strengthens their resilience and or reliance on contractors and AI. No joke. I mean, I don't know what they're using AI for. Maybe just to help them with coding, because this is a programmer, it seems, an engineer, senior, engineer or whatever. But I mean, it jives with what everybody else has heard. Everybody else has heard that the workplace is fairly toxic and the leadership sucks, and it seems like that's just more and more confirmed. And it really, really is just shocking how the mighty fall. He took my thing.